This panel is organized in partnership with the Balkan Trust For Democracy, a project of the German Marshall Fund of the United States and the Royal Norwegian Embassy. Dear participants, welcome to the 10th Belgrade Security Forum. Our next panel is starting now. Thank you for watching the online...
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Cameron Munter, and I'm the moderator of this panel. I realize the sound may be weak. I will try to be as clear as I can. The speakers today will be Mr. Aleksandar Vučić, President of Serbia, Mr. Avdullah Hoti, Prime Minister of Kosovo, Mr. Miroslav Lajčák, EU Special Representative for Kosovo and Serbia, as well as the Western Balkans, and Mr. Ryan Tully, the U.S. National Security Council's Senior Director for Europe and Russia. I will ask each of the speakers to address us for 5 minutes, and then we will turn to discussion. May I first ask President Vučić to speak to the group for 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Cameron. And to tell you the truth, I'm not in the habit of using all these devices and don't know actually how does it function, but hopefully you can hear me, and I'll do my best to be as brief as it is possible because we've already lost more than 20 minutes. I'm not a very optimistic person, but apart from that, I think that we need to work together. When I say we, I mean Belgrade and Pristina, under the auspices, under the facilitation of the European Union, and with the great support of all the other big powers, of course, the United States of America. And I think that there is something of an utmost significance for all of us, and that is how to keep peace, stability, and tranquility in our region. That's something of an utmost importance. And then, of course, to see how we can develop our relationship from the very, then to relatively hostile environment to the normal environment, including free flow of goods, capital, people, and services. That's good for the people, and that will have to happen regardless of our different political opinions, regardless of our different political affiliations. I have no doubts about it. Of course, Serbia is not in an easy situation because 22 out of 27 EU countries have already recognized Kosovo's independence according to UN rules, regulations, according to 1244 UN resolution. Of course, that resolution keeps territorial integrity of Serbia, which says completely different to everything that has already been said by big Western powers. And that's why we are not in an easy position, and that's why we would like to see a compromising solution between two parties, between two sides. And we have always been very open for all kinds of different discussions, and we hope that the European Union will, together with us, struggle for that compromise, because there is no other alternative. But if you ask me whether it's going to be easy or whether we are ready for that, you can always hear Albanians from Pristina saying, yes, we are ready, we just wait for Serbia to recognize Kosovo, and then we'll recognize Serbia and everything will be solved. Of course, it doesn't work like that, and it's much more complicated. And if you ask us, we think that we should change an atmosphere, that we should implement everything that we have already signed, starting with the first agreement, starting with the Brussels agreement that both sides signed on April 19th, 2013, and gradually to change the overall atmosphere, to get people closer to each other. That's why we appreciated American initiative on this, speaking about economic ties between two factions, between two parties, and that's why we already agreed with Pristina Belgrade-Pristina under the facilitation of EU on the same issue. Speaking about two societies, I think that we are very far away from the real reconciliation, and it's not formal issues or status issues that will solve it easily, but we'll have to work and not always to see the other side as a true opponent or dare to say even from time to time true enemy, but to try to find enough possibilities to get closer to each other. That's what I think. Of course, I'm not very much optimistic, but we are very dedicated and will carry on the dialogue process in Brussels, and we'll be absolutely ready to work very hard on this and to see whether we can reach a compromising solution or not. Thank you for listening to me, and sorry that I took a lot of your time.
Thank you so much, Mr. Vučić. And I think the theme of trust, of building trust, is very much one we want to work on to get to those points you mentioned. I'd like to ask the Prime Minister now, Prime Minister Hoti, to come in with 5 minutes, please. Mr. Prime Minister.
Thanks a lot. Can you hear me now? Yeah.
Yes.
Hello to everybody. It's great talking to all of you. I think this is a good opportunity to talk together, to share our views on current developments between our two countries and in the region as well. I think we have seen during the last 2 decades tremendous transformation of relations between our countries in the region, which is a clear sign of a peaceful future and a stable future and stable region. We have seen increase in interaction between our governments, people, trade, and in other areas as well. And I think we have to thank primarily EU and the United States for their role in assisting us through various mechanisms such as EU enlargement process and then technical assistance and development, financial aid given to our countries in the region. As far as we are concerned as a country, our regional relations policy is based on the principles of constructive and good neighborhood policy. But of course, I think we are all aware that such a regional policy is possible when we work together, when we recognize each other, when we engage in a constructive dialogue to solve all issues, be it bilateral or regional issues, as well as providing adequate protection of minority rights, and work together, all countries in the region, within the EU integration framework. On the issue of regional security, I think we have given clear signs that as a country, we are contributing and we will contribute to the security in the region. And I think Western Balkans was and should remain a region with a clear democratic future and Euro-Atlantic zone as well. I think we are not on the borderline of the EU, actually. We are in fact the mainland of the EU. Therefore, I believe our region has a great European future. Regarding our relations with countries in the region, we have shown clear signs of commitment to achieve peace and stability in the region and to normalize our relations after the devastating wars of the 1990s. We have strengthened all relations with all countries in the region, and I think we have shown strong commitment toward full normalizations of relations with Serbia. Our policy is clear to work with all countries in the region in good spirit, aiming normalization, strengthening regional peace and stability, increasing cooperation in all fields. We have been an active participant in all regional mechanisms, and we will remain so. I think issues that are related to security, regional security, can be addressed only when we work together. It's good that throughout the region, all countries in the region, and Kosovo included as well, have clear intention toward EU integration and NATO membership as well. We want to become an exporter of security as a country to contribute to the security in the region and beyond the region. On the dialogue between Kosovo and Serbia, I think there is no doubt that this EU-facilitated dialogue continues to be the key mechanism and will remain the key mechanism to full normalizations of relations between our two countries. Of course, the Washington Agreement was a huge and historic step toward this full normalizations of our relations, which of course should imply mutual recognition between our two countries. Kosovo is ready for such an agreement. We are working on that on a daily basis toward that agreement. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Prime Minister. I appreciate the clarity and the brevity of both of your statements. To Mr. Miroslav Lajčák, the representative of the EU, perhaps you can tell us how you hope the road ahead will contribute to making clear how the success of these countries can move forward. Thank you, Miroslav.
Thank you very much. And thank you for the invitation. I am here in my capacity of the European Union Special Representative for Belgrade-Pristina dialogue and other Western Balkans regional issues, but also as someone who has spent more than 20 years of my professional life in the region and with the region. So let me start by saying that I find the title of this conference quite fitting, because without peace there will be no solutions to many regional problems, and there will be no sustainable peace without trust among partners. And this applies to every part of the life. There will be no full normalization of economic relations, there will be no free movement of people, there will be no flourishing trade, and no real and unhindered progress. So the question is, how do we get there? How do we build a much needed trust? And in this context, I would like to make 3 brief points. The first one is about past and reconciliation. Because to promote trust, we need to come to terms with the recent very tragic past of the region. And it is a fact that the recent painful history of the Balkans is still overshadowing much of today's reality. And while we cannot change the past, we can learn from it. And therefore we all need to do our share in uncovering the full truth and bearing the consequences, no matter how painful this might be. But the past must be addressed and processed by the experts of the matter, namely the judiciary and the historians. Leave history to the historians and criminal proceedings to the judiciary. This is not a job for the politicians. Politicians should focus on solving the problems and challenges of today in the interest of a better tomorrow, rather than capitalizing on the past. This is true everywhere in the world, but this is particularly true in the Balkans, where the most recent history has affected practically every family in every part of the region, and it still does today. My second point is about the European Union and the European future. And here I want to say that despite all the divisions, the Western Balkans have more in common than they usually admit. And it's not only the common history, but also their common future, their European future. And this is the key. To be able to address the many problems on one's plates, every leader in the region needs to have one question in mind, namely, is the step I'm going to make, is the decision I'm going to take, going to bring me and my people closer to the membership in the European Union, or the opposite, push me further away from it? And to be honest, I do not think that the leading politicians are asking themselves this question often enough. Because if they did, the region would be much further advanced on its European path. And there will be less confusion about the mismatch of words and action. Of course, you may say that it is difficult to subordinate every action to a European perspective, when this perspective is often blurred and when the goalpost is clearly moving. And I do not say that you would be wrong. And yes, it is no secret that the idea of the future European enlargement has lost its attractiveness in many corners of the European Union, and it's clearly not an idea that helps you win elections in many EU member states. The argument is that not every past enlargement is considered a full success in retrospective. And the European Union got cautious when it comes to importing unsolved challenges to avoid future problems and disappointments. So today we are finding ourselves in sort of catch-22 situation. The EU member states need to be convinced that supporting enlargement is a good idea. It will make the European Union stronger, more prosperous, and the proof must come from the countries that are part of the accession process or are about to become. And at the same time, the countries of the region need to see, hear, and feel that the European perspective is not just a distant dream, but rather an immediate and very real future. So what's the way out of this dilemma? My answer is very hard and painful work. The countries of the region must convince those who need to be convinced that the enlargement is a win-win solution and not a one-way street. After all, the European Union is the most advanced, prosperous, and successful community of nations. And the European Union also a partner that honors its commitment, including the commitment given in Thessaloniki in 2003. We invest significant amount of political capital but also money to help the region to achieve its European perspective. And finally, about the Belgrade-Pristina dialogue, although this discussion today is not and should not be seen as an extension of a Brussels-based dialogue. I see the process of normalization of relations between Serbia and Kosovo as a major contribution to a regional trust and a significant element for resolving regional challenges. And that's why we aim at achieving 3 goals at the same time. First, to normalize relations between the two parties. Second, to build the process and future solutions on European norms and values, and thus bringing the region significantly closer to its European future. And thirdly, to contribute to regional stability. It's not an easy process. The solution will be a painful compromise, but I have no doubt that it is doable, and it is definitely worth it. And I want to use this opportunity to thank my interlocutors, President Vučić and Prime Minister Hoti, for their commitment to the dialogue and for their resolve to carry it forward despite sometimes harsh criticism at home. You are on the right side of the history, and the history will recognize it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lajčák. We very much appreciate your efforts in this as well. Now let's turn, please, to Mr. Ryan Tully from the perspective of the United States. Ryan?
Thank you, and I just wanted to say that there is a echo and a feedback here that's hard to understand everything that's being said, but I'll try and get through this. My remarks. Ambassador, Mr. President, Mr. Prime Minister, Special Representative Lajčák, it's an honor to be with you today to discuss economic normalization between Belgrade and Pristina. For over 20 years of limited progress in the political negotiations between Belgrade and Pristina, President Trump decided to try and flip the script and focus on economic normalization. The president firmly believes increased economic ties between Belgrade and Pristina, including economic growth and job creation, are key confidence-building measures that will build trust between the two parties. The lack of formal economic channels between Belgrade and Pristina have complicated the most basic of transactions. 5-hour delays at the border, the absence of rail, air, highway links, and the lack of mutual recognition of professional certificates and diplomas, for example, have hindered economic growth and contributed to brain drain with young individuals in the region moving elsewhere to pursue their education and career opportunities. The economic normalization commitments made by President Vučić and Prime Minister Hoti at the White House on September 4th were important steps forward in addressing these issues. Both leaders demonstrated tremendous courage and forward-thinking leadership in making these commitments, and President Trump is committed to supporting Belgrade and Pristina in implementing and operationalizing these commitments. The week of September 21st, the United States sent a high-level delegation to Belgrade and Pristina, led by U.S. International Development Finance Corporation Chairman, CEO Adam Bowler, and Special Advisor to the President of Serbia and Kosovo, Ambassador Rick Grinnell. The senior delegation, encompassing high-level officials from 6 U.S. agencies and departments, operationalized several components of the September 4th commitments. In Belgrade, for example, the DFC established its permanent presence and opened an office in its first in Europe. In a ceremony with the President Vučić and Prime Minister Hoti, designate Brambach. The September trip was only the beginning. As we speak, I currently have a team and another delegation in Belgrade and Pristina, led by the Department of Energy, along with representatives from PNNL, other U.S. agencies, and the National Security Council. This delegation is conducting the technical assessment of Lake Trump in accordance with September 4th commitments. In addition, they are meeting with key individuals in Belgrade and Pristina to assist with energy diversification, a key security goal. We appreciate the support of our European colleagues and encourage their continued support of economic normalization between Belgrade and Pristina. Ambassador O'Brien, Ambassador Grinnell have been in close contact with our German, French colleagues on these issues and spoke to Special Representative Lajčák right before the September 4th meeting. We look forward to continuing to support the Belgrade and Pristina during economic confidence building process and hope that it'll create the conditions required for the two leaders to resolve long-standing challenging issues. With that, I thank you, and I look forward to the questions. And the feedback has seemed to stop here, so I thank you for whoever was doing that on the technical side.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tully. We are a little late getting started, and so I'd like to go right to some questions. And if I can begin with these questions in kind of reverse order. Mr. Tully, this element of building trust and building economic growth in the region is something that is, of course, beyond just a question of the countries there. There's the United States, there's the Europeans, and there are outside actors as well. How do you propose that further work from the United States can work in tandem to take advantage of the efforts of Europeans and of other players to build this economic growth that you foresee in the region?
So I think I got most of that question. I think we saw the process on September 4th here at the White House as kind of laying a foundation for which and a tandem process by which the EU and the US can work and help bring the two partners together. The bounds and the ties that are formed and that connective tissue that is developed by having increased commerce is something that can be built upon. And I mean, I know that here in the United States, as we deal with COVID, as we try and recover, and as our economies try and get off the ground, people want jobs. People want to be able to provide for their families. And we think that that's those opportunities and the ability to do those things can lay a foundation going forward.
Thank you, Mr. Tully. Mr. Lajčák, perhaps from a European perspective, there is much talk that the European Union has lost some of its attractiveness in the region. What do you propose to do, perhaps in Sofia, November 10th, or in other areas, to help come up with new ideas to make the European Union an even stronger partner for the people in the region?
Well, I tried to address this question already in my opening remarks. The fact is that the European Union is facing many challenges, obviously, and but I would also say that it's doing it quite successfully. I mean, we managed to adopt the next 7-year budget. We managed to adopt unprecedented economic recovery plan. And we managed to help the member states fighting with the COVID. And with all these, we have been thinking of our friends and partners in the Western Balkans like nobody else. European Union set aside huge, unprecedented amounts of money for our partners in the Balkans, both for the COVID, it's 3.3 billion euros, for the economic development, which is some 9 billion euros. And the European Union has demonstrated that it's a true friend and partner for the Western Balkans. And I've heard from many leaders of the region that they would not be able to cope with the COVID if it was not for the assistance coming from the European Union. Yes, sometimes I wish we were faster and more political, I would say, in making our decisions. Yes, it's true that we've made a political decision to open accession negotiations with North Macedonia and Albania in March. And now we are in October and we still have not started the process. Actually, it took a year and a half for Serbia between the decision and the opening of the process. And of course, this does not help. And I also know that our partners are sometimes frustrated that, as I said, the goalpost seems to be moving, and it is moving. At the same time, as I said, European Union is solid, it honors its commitment, and therefore there is no need to be desperate, or there is no need to have doubts. What was promised will be made possible, but of course our partners also need to demonstrate on a daily basis that European integration is their #1 priority. So it's a very solid process. I wish it was faster. I'm sure it will be better for both parties, but I don't think we need to create new ideas. We just have to be honest and very consistent in implementing those that are already on the table, and each of us must do its part.
Thank you, Mr. Lajčák. Prime Minister Hoti, what are you doing in Pristina to try to meet those challenges that Mr. Lajčák has mentioned? What kind of domestic changes are you making? What kind of ways are you building trust between your constituency and the European Union and indeed the world community? What do you propose to do to make this possible, what Mr. Lajčák is suggesting?
We have actually more than 4 months in office now. And among our first decisions were to open the way for the dialogue process, and we did that. Those decisions for us are very unpopular. But the good thing is that there is strong support among our citizens for the dialogue process and for the EU integration process. And from that perspective, I think we are more than ready to move forward. For us, it's very clear. There is no alternative to EU integration and to NATO integration. There is only one way, and we are going to wait as long as possible and to work hard to meet all the requirements for this process. For us also, there is no other way to solve the issue between our two countries than through the dialogue process. What I'm trying to do is to build the necessary political consensus inside the country for this important process through working very closely with Mr. Lajčák and with all EU partners and the US as well on making sure that we stay on strong principles during this important process. I think as long as we maintain this strong focus on the end process of this dialogue, we might be able to make progress. We have achieved some progress until now, since July when we started this process. So I'm very confident that we can move forward.
Thank you very much, Mr. Prime Minister. President Vučić, part of building for this future is building a public consensus, as Mr. Hoti has said, that part of the challenge that both you and Mr. Hoti face is getting your citizens to support the kind of sacrifices that must be made. What are you doing to prepare them for this future? What are you doing by reforms at home that will allow your citizens to fit better in a European future?
Many thanks for this question. I'm sorry that I'm going at least to spoil a bit the unanimity and consensus on this discussion, because I think something differently. When you speak about Pristina's public audience, there are no any ideas of reaching compromising solution. The only thing they're mentioning every single time, and you could hear it even today, it's the end of the process. We need to get recognition from Serbia. And what is the compromising solution? Nobody knows, and no one has ever heard. And it means, okay, we're gonna get everything. Someone will push Serbia to do so. Someone will make more pressure on Serbia. Then Serbs will deliver on that, and then everybody will be very happy, and then we'll live in a peace and tranquility for next 1,000 years. And if you ask them what would be the real issues that they're gonna tackle in a way to get closer to a deal, no questions, no answers, and it lasts for more than 2-3 years. Speaking about Serbia, and I discussed it with you, dear Cameron, several times, I'm not satisfied with the level of rational or realistic approach from our own people and even from our government, and because I think that I cannot say that we don't say the truth. We do say the truth, but you know, it's still in Serbia not very easy to discuss the realistic options and the rational issues regarding Kosovo, and we still see, and I can confirm that it's pretty much the same with Albanians in Pristina, that we see each other as not only a political opponent, but a sort of national opponents that we should fight with, and this is something that we both should change. That sort of narrative is not very helpful, but we need to be, if you ask me, we need to be, all of us, we need to be more realistic. You know, Miro is putting a lot of efforts. That's why there is something that I didn't hide, why I appreciated that Washington arrangement. Miro is really putting huge efforts into this negotiating process. But, you know, and he's very smart. He's a very smart man, very experienced man. But no one, even he cannot say, okay, what is the carrot? What is that someone might get? You can always hear, you can get closer to European Union. That's the only sentence which explains everything. You can get closer, it means for the ordinary people, it doesn't mean a lot, because nobody is saying you're going to be a new EU member state. Because there always would be but. There were no buts when Romania, Hungary, and some other countries were joining EU. And it shows not only that they lost attractiveness in the region, but we lost attractiveness within the European Union. That's very fair to be said. On the other side, if we need to speak about, I was listening and I didn't want to react. Avdullah Hoti was just mentioned, I think, 12 times, 2 countries, 2 countries. And I was asking him not to say that thousands of times during our sessions, during our meetings. I was saying this to him, if you want to get closer to us, don't mention it every single time. We all know what you think. We all know what your attitude is. No, just because of his internal public audience, it has always been the case, 2 countries, 2 countries, 2 countries. And if you remember any single word that he pronounced, it's 2 countries that we heard thousands of times today. And if I would say now, okay, there are no 2 countries, there is only 1 country that is a member of the United Nations and everything else, would you support me, which is true, in accordance with the resolution 1244? And that's why I'm speaking, coming back, that's why I'm speaking about building confidence, building trust. That's of an utmost importance. That's what we need to work on. We need to respect each other. If they want to say, if they want to diminish Serbian constitution, if they want to say that there is no existing resolution 1244, we can say everything the opposite about them, and or everything the same about them, and then what would be the conclusion? And sorry that I'm saying some different things. It doesn't mean that we are not ready for the compromising solution, because if I say that people in Serbia from time to time, they speak a lot about Kosovo, but nobody really knows what is happening in Kačanik or what is happening in Zrze, on the road between Prizren and Đakovica, you know, but okay, there were some other issues, but at the same time, when we speak about compromising solution, it cannot be a compromise. Serbia will recognize Kosovo, and then Kosovo will recognize Serbia. We don't need it. We are a recognized country by everybody in the world. What we need is a compromising solution. You need to understand Serbia's position. You need to understand Belgrade's position. You need to understand that we need to take care of Serbs in Kosovo. And now coming to the end and to conclude this, you know, it has passed, I think, 7.5 years. 7.5 years after we signed this Brussels agreement. There was only one obligation for Albanian side: to form or to create Serb community, Serb association. You know what is their response today? The response today is, well, we are not interested in creating that before Serbia will recognize Kosovo's independence. It means that it was not signed in Brussels that we gonna recognize Kosovo's independence, but it was signed and guaranteed by European Union that they're gonna fulfill all their obligations from that agreement. And now they say, we don't care about it, we'll never fulfill it, because it's a part of their internal agenda. We need to know, okay, if we agreed on something, whether we're gonna fulfill it or not. Number two, what we are discussing about, is it a compromising solution or is it more and more pressure on Serbian side? Which is also okay, but we need to define it. Number three, do you really want to create normal relationship between Serbs and Albanians, or you want to win over or to beat in a way Serbs saying, okay, we won after all and we fulfilled our dreams and now Serbia lost everything and that's okay. I think that we both will have to be equally dissatisfied or at least a bit satisfied if we want to reach a compromising solution. And all the other ideas will never ever be successful. And it's not about getting political points. I don't need it. In Serbia, as you know, I have no problems with that. And that's why I'm very ready to discuss all the issues very openly. But the problem is that I see that it's always internal agenda more important than the real strategic issues. But strategically speaking, we are always ready for the dialogue. And I'm not going to repeat all these sentences that all of us learned about a European future and everything that European politicians wanted to hear from us. No, if you want to discuss the substance, we are ready. If you want to discuss strategic issues and the big tactical issues, we are ready for that. But you know, if we want to reach a compromising solution, it has to be a compromise, not a blackmail for Serbia or not something that Serbia will have to fulfill. And then what if we recognize Kosovo? And I'm saying that is not going to happen, but if we do that, what Albanians will do? They will say, okay, Serbs, you're not that bad guys as we were saying, and now we are going to recognize you. And Serbia will get what? Sorry that I put this in a very practical and very pragmatic way in front of you, and that's why we insist on this dialogue process, and that's why this Brussels process is of an utmost significance, and I hope that, I know that Miro, I don't say that he's on our side, to the contrary, but I think that he does understand the situation, that he knows that we need to work harder, that we need to work a lot, and that both sides have to understand the real difficulties of the moment, and we need to stabilize the region and we need to keep the peace. At least, I always say, whatever we speak, whatever we say to each other, it's always better to have talks, to have this kind of conversation than not to have it. Because in the recent years, we had this kind of discussions, we had this kind of talks under the facilitation of the European Union, and that helped us preserving peace and preserving people's lives. That is something very important, and sorry that I took a lot of your time once again. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Hoti, do you have a response to any of the points that Mr. Vučić has just made?
No, thanks a lot. I actually missed a significant part of his speech because it was blocked. I couldn't hear most of it, but let me say this. I think we have to be clear that we are not negotiating a trade deal between our two countries. When you negotiate a trade deal, you can then frame that discussion and frame the agreement as what each of the countries involved in that agreement is actually winning and what is losing in that trade deal. We are working toward a peace deal of full normalization of relations between the two countries. And in that respect, I think we shouldn't frame the discussion as what Serbia is winning or what Serbia is losing or what Kosovo is winning or losing. The important thing is to see the reality, and what both countries are going to win is a peaceful neighborhood, living together, normalizing relations, making possible for our citizens to travel freely, making possible for our businesses to trade on equal basis. I know that we have so many issues to address from the past, with missing persons primarily the main issue actually from the past, but we are willing to sit on the dialogue table to reach this agreement. Let us not discuss as what Serbia is going to win or lose, just accepting the reality and also accepting some issues from the past in order to be able to move forward, in order to be able to build a peaceful future forever. Not a temporary solution, but a permanent solution between our two countries. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lajčák, you have these two positions which have been very eloquently outlined. It's as much atmosphere as it is substance. What kind of advice do you have for your two friends, Mr. Hoti and Mr. Vučić, in the days to come, especially given the pressures that we feel in this time of COVID and of other unsettling news?
Well, I am in a regular direct contact with President Vučić and Prime Minister Hoti, so I do not intend to send them messages using this platform. Also, I said, and for a purpose, that I do not see this panel as a continuation of Brussels dialogue on normalization of relations, but it's evident that we are actors in a monumental endeavor. This is a huge process, extremely important, extremely challenging, extremely difficult. And it's really important that we are all aware of this. This is a process that requires a compromise. This cannot be a victory for one party and defeat for the other party. This never works like that. And also should not be instrumentalized for daily politics. I mean, my permanent message is that the dialogue must be put above the daily politics. There are so many other issues that, of course, have to be addressed on a daily basis, but we need to have understanding of our public. We need to have strong support from the international community, from the European Union in the first place, and strong support from our US friends, and strong commitment of our partners. And as I said, I see these strong commitments on the side of President Vučić and on the side of Prime Minister Hoti. Not everybody on their side is happy with that, but this is the only right approach.
Thank you so much. I'd like to turn to a quick question for Mr. Tully. You know, there is the American role, there is the European role, there is the regional role, but there are other actors as well. There is Russia, there is China, there is even Turkey. There are people who are important and perhaps with time becoming even more important in the region. How do you see it from the American point of view? Can all of these actors make a positive contribution to the kind of problem we want to solve here?
The answer is we hope so. Some of the things that we focused on with the economic normalization was to try and diversify energy resources, to try and help on 5G. So, I mean, when you look at those type of issues, energy and 5G, those are players where there's Chinese players, there's U.S. players, there's Russian players in those fields. And so where we are engaging bilaterally with both parties, and we're helping educate them. But also, if you look at our national security strategy, we are in a period of we call great power competition with both Russia and China. So there's a history here of all parties. That's going to be part of the future. But the U.S. is planning on staying very engaged in the region. And I think you're going to see that regardless of how things shake out here over the next 2 weeks.
Very much, Mr. Tully. I think we're coming now towards the end of our session. And I would be remiss if I didn't give each of the speakers perhaps a chance just to make a final comment, perhaps a minute long, about a point that he would like to make sure the audience takes away. So let's start with Mr. Vučić. Your final comment, perhaps a minute. Thank you.
I'll do my best not to make a real political statement and to be as much sincere as it is possible. I think that we need to work hard, to work much harder, that we all, including all important to all big international players, that will have to try to find and to reach a compromising solution, which means, if necessary, doing many things out of the box in resolving this problem. And I'm not referring to any adjustments of border lines or administrative lines or something like that. I'm speaking about different political ideas, different political issues, and we need to put a lot of efforts in front of us and to be more strategic than tactically political oriented. That's it, and we are going to be fully engaged into this process, and will invest, as I have already said, huge efforts to reaching this compromising solution.
Thank you, sir. Prime Minister Hoti.
Thanks a lot. From our part, we have shown strong commitments for this process. We are going to remain so toward reaching this comprehensive deal, this peaceful agreement, but making sure that this process stays on clear principles based on which the process started last July. We are going to be fully engaged on reaching this full normalization agreement on principles of finding a systematic solution, not a creative solutions, but systematic solutions based on clear principles of making sure that these two countries reach to an agreement that respect the reality and ensure clear EU perspective for the two countries and for the region as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And before I turn to Mr. Lajčák, I'd like to mention that we know the efforts the EU has made, but we also want to tip our hat to the efforts of organizations like the sponsors of this session, the Balkan Trust, the Norwegian Embassy, and I would also like to mention the Balkan Dialogues, which I've had the honor of taking part in. where we have a number of people, not just governments, who are taking part in this. So I'd like a comment from Mr. Lajčák, but also perhaps just a word on the role of citizens, on the role of businesses, on the role of other civic groups in bringing this peace. Thank you.
This process is multifaceted because this is a process that is about to bring about a normalization of relations between Serbia and Kosovo. It's a process that is bringing peace and sustainable peace. This is a process that is bringing prosperity, better life for people and better opportunities for businesses. And it's also a process that is bringing tangible European future. And therefore, I really hope that we will succeed because it's in the interest of every citizen of Serbia, of Kosovo, every citizen of the Balkans, and it's very important also for the European Union and the United States. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Lajčák. And Mr. Tully, your final thoughts and what you would like the audience to take with them as they reflect on these issues.
Are twofold. First, I'd like to say thank you to both the President, the Prime Minister, the Special Representative, and our hosts today for putting this on. It's important that we continue to have these conversations, that we continue to have both easy and difficult conversations, and try and advance this process. So thank you to everybody for continuing to stay engaged. My second message is that the United States and the Trump administration have made a sustained effort, and we are going to continue to stay engaged in this region. We've had two high-level delegations. One is still there in the region, and we're going to continue to try and push forward and do what we can and help our EU friends and partners on that. So the United States is here, and we're going to continue to be here. So that's my second takeaway. Thank you again.
I would like to thank you, and I would like to thank all the participants for their candid words on these very important topics. Thank all of you who have been watching for your attention, and let us all hope for a continued process in the coming year. Thank you.
Thank you for watching the online panel of the 10th Belgrade Security Forum. We will be back soon.